Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar with Henry Gewanter on crisis communications and reputation management. This webinar forms part of our growing online library, which can be found on the GoToStage website platform. You'll find a link in the email following today's event. You may have joined the webinar listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to use your phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Our webinar program aims to be as interactive as possible. If you have any questions for today's guest, all you need to do is type them into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them either during or after the Q&A session. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the person who's putting the questions to Henry, Dermot Hill, Director of Stakeholderz.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to this webinar. Before I go on, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Stakeholderz, which is an equity funding platform which specializes in raising 300,000 to $1 million. And our uniqueness lies in the fact that we have a talent base of 8,500 senior executives clustered around us, basically acting as smart money. And that, of course, begins to build out both the executive teams and the investment the ventures that come to us receive. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Henry Gewanter, who is in fact a media communications consultant. And before we came on air, we were talking about what I shouldn't touch on, so I'm going to do this. He said, "I'm sick of digging people out of a hole." And I thought that was probably quite a good line to introduce him with. I've known Henry for quite some time. He's got an eminent background. I think one or two of you in the audience will know about that. He has a very, very significant profile in sorting out some pretty large black spots in the economy, in the finance world, and indeed in the political world. So without any further ado, Henry, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you, Dermot, and greetings to all of you. I'm Henry Gewanter. I'm the Managing Director of Positive Profile, which is a corporate communications consultancy. Dermot's asked me to tell you a little bit about some of the things I've done in the past, which is why I might be vaguely qualified to talk to you today. I started off my PR career dealing with a very high-profile City of London crisis. Well, it's what we called the Blue Arrow crisis, and what the world's media called the Blue Arrow scandal. So that gave me a lifetime's experience in high-profile crisis management and disaster containment control, and helped to introduce me to all the world's editors, both UK and international. My next big high-profile crisis was working for IMRO, the Investment Management Regulatory Organization, and that was during the Maxwell pension scandal. And since then, I also handled the Split Capital Investment Trust scandal and the MP's expenses scandal. So although with the MP's expenses scandal, I was on the offense rather than the defense. So I've had experience in both handling and reducing the effects of crisis, but for many politicians, causing quite a crisis for them and their careers. I think that's probably enough. Thank you, Dermot.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Henry. First slide, please. So, okay, where we're headed, what's the best way to handle a crisis? And we're actually going to talk about, probably centered around this morning, the COVID-19 situation. But in your view, what is the best way to actually handle this crisis that we're in? And temper, obviously, your experience. Over to you.
Thank you, Dermot. Well, first, I'd like to just have just a general background talk. Crisis. Well, the world is at war now. Okay, we're at war with a microscopic virus, and it's changed everything and about our lives and the way we have to do business, if indeed we can still do any at all. I love the ancient world. It's always been one of my hobbies. And the ancient Roman soldiers who conquered the known world, they revered the god Mithras, the god of war. And I'd just like to show you a little ancient Roman statuette of Mithras here. And so before we begin, I'd just like to cast the Mithras god's blessing on all of you in this current war. Now, the ancient Romans, we think of them as incredibly sophisticated and intelligent. But to begin with, actually, they were just brutal barbarians. This is what they used to use for money. Okay, this is a ramo secco. It's just a solid, incredibly heavy brick of bronze and very unwieldy. And it wasn't until the more sophisticated and civilized Greeks taught them the concept of making round money, coins, that they started to become more civilized. This is an Eis Grab, a heavy bronze. This is the original pound coin. We call our pound a pound because the original pounds weighed a pound of bronze. And this is an example of one of those. Now, enough of that. The reason I wanted to start with the ancient world, because the Greeks, who, as I say, were more civilized, they had the word crisis as well, but spelt with a K. And what crisis meant to them, it wasn't a terrible disaster. It wasn't, let's panic. It wasn't, oh my goodness, what do we do next? It meant judgment. And the point about a crisis and handling a crisis is it needs the exercise of judgment. There are a number of other things you need to do as well. But judgment, I think, is one of those really important main things in successfully dealing with whatever the world throws at you. So, so I'd like that. We'll come back to that theme in a minute, but it's a critical condition, and like a critical condition in medicine, and we're dealing with this virus, it can sometimes be a matter of life and death, and that's where cool, calm deliberation and judgment can often be the deciding factor. Now, in dealing with a crisis, I know we'll come on to the coronavirus separately after this, but they're just general techniques. Killing a town below for a mining company, it can be a corporate or financial problem, it can be Robert Maxwell stealing the pension fund, it could be anything at all. So the first thing you should do, whatever the problem is just apologize. Just say, I'm terribly, terribly sorry. And far too many people just skip that first step. And they bluster or they try and make excuses. If you say you're sorry, even when, well, we'll come back, just say you're sorry. That's what people need to hear. Now, once you've apologized, you then should explain what happened, why it happened. And if you don't know, sometimes, a crisis happens on the other side of the world and you don't have all the facts and figures, but the press are hounding you already. You just say, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll come right back to you as quickly as I can. And then it's imperative that you do exactly that. Then after saying what went wrong, or, coming back to that, you then need to explain what you're going to do, what you're doing now or will be doing soon to fix the problem and to prevent any recurrence, okay? Because bad things happen all the time to everybody. And it's not necessarily, even when it is your fault, that's not the issue for people. The issue is, what are you going to do to make it right? And to not have to go through this same thing over and over again. And then the next step is, whatever it is you're saying you're going to do to fix the problem and prevent recurrence, you need to do exactly what you said you do. You've got to stick to your word and live up to it. That's incredibly important. And then finally, just a tip for, I know there are some corporate communications experts in the crowd here, and I'm looking forward to your stinky questions afterwards. It'll be no doubt very tricky. For companies big enough to have a corporate communications team or just a person, you need to bear in mind to use the chief executive's time very wisely. They have to front with the media and the general public and their investors and and so on, but they've got a real job to do in the real world of running the business, fixing the problem, preventing recurrence. So you need to shield them from interruptions and excessive intrusions to free up their time to deal with the real problem in life. Okay, it's too easy in the heat of the moment to think the media are the problem. They're not. They're just a symptom. Okay, so corporate comms people deal with the symptoms, or just put them on hold to give the boss time to really sort things out. I think that's so that's my general advice about that. Our next point is, how does this crisis differ from others, and does that change what's needed? And in a way, it doesn't. I'd still say you should apologize. It's not your fault that there's a virus. It's not your fault the government's shut down everything and made us all stay at home. But that doesn't really matter. You're sorry. I'm sorry this has happened. I really am. I hate being stuck at home. I hate not being able to go out and do my job as fully and completely in all the ways that I'd like to. Now, lawyers will often advise you to never apologize. It's an admission of guilt. It could lead to potential liability. I would say, remember that lawyers are, if a good lawyer is good at law, but they're not usually very good at business. And your job as a business person is you're running the business, you're handling the crisis, you are the one that needs to form a judgment and make a decision. And so whatever the lawyers say, I say, just apologize. If you're liable, you'll have to pay up anyway. And if you're not, saying sorry, you're sorry this happened, isn't really an admission of fault. And it's what people, psychologically, it's what people need to hear. So I'd say, it's your job to use your judgment, take the commercial risk, and overrule your lawyer. Now, there are some unique steps for dealing with the virus. And this has to do with a sort of business continuity plans. Now, many of you will already have them, but they tend to be plans for things like fires or floods or robbery, burglaries, or hacking of the computers or whatever, competitor attacks. For this one, there's actually a medical risk, a physical risk. And for that, there are things that are quite obviously, retail stores are put, supermarkets are put in place. You need to change the staff arrangements, the physical layout, the sanitizing, hand washing, working from home, all that kind of stuff. You need to figure out how can you make it safe for your employees, and how can you make it safe for your customers, your clients, to continue to do business with you. The next issue I'd say is one of productivity. How can you do more with less? You may have to furlough some of your employees or lay them off. You may have fewer staff you can continue to carry during these difficult times. So how can you help those who remain to do things differently or more efficiently to help cover the slack? Next is, I would say, training or cross-skilling, as it's called. Use the downtime to improve the quality and capabilities of your team. It's a great time to help them, to train them, to cover for the others who can't work because they're ill or are no longer with you.
Henry?
Next, yes.
Just a quick point. I mean, there's a ton of information you're giving on this answer. There are a lot of other questions we should be going through. Shall we just encourage the audience to respond to this post the webinar, and you can update them on the list? And shall we move on? Because I think there's some fascinating questions. And I'm just saying this because I'm mindful of time. And there's so much.
I am a chatterbox, so I appreciate your timeliness.
Hopefully
Okay.
you'll forgive the interruption. Shall I move on then? I mean, how does the crisis differ then from others, and how does that change what's needed? So, and it's this particular COVID-19 crisis we're talking about.
Okay, I think in terms of the communications as opposed to the business restructuring, the key to the key to it is really very much the same as for any crisis. Apologize for the disruption to your clients. Explain what's happened to your business. What needs to be done differently, or if you're shutting down, that you look forward to starting up again. But to explain what's happened, the effect of it, what's going to happen going forward, and then to just reassure them that you're still there for them in whatever way you can be. And I think that's really all anybody could expect in terms of corporate communications from any business. Well, all businesses, many businesses have been affected by this crisis. So that's what I'd suggest. The next point is, who should you talk to and what should you say? And I think that follows on quite nicely. You've got what are called key stakeholders, and those are your customers, your staff, key partners or suppliers, and for many of you, investors as well. For the customers, you probably already, all of you have probably received many dozens of these already, but draft an email to your public. Summarize your position, apologize for the inconvenience, explain what steps you've taken and what you'll do to taking things forward. So, for example, Dermot might write to all our members here, members of Stakeholderz, and just say something along the lines of, good morning, I hope you're all well. I've been asked by a number of members what the impact of the virus is on our investment platform and the appetite of our investment community. Hence, I thought it's time to provide a timely update, blah, 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 tell them the update, kind regards, Dermot. So that's an example of the sort of thing I'm sure you've already seen, but which I would recommend all of you send out now if you haven't already. The next point is, should we rip up our marketing plans or just adapt them? And I guess that really depends on your plans and what type of business you're in. But unless you have to completely re-engineer your business and shelve all your plans for the foreseeable future, in general, I'd say it's better to adapt what you've got to suit the changing circumstances. So I caution against throwing the baby out with the bathwater or reinventing the wheel. That's why we have these expressions. Although, of course, there's also the expression, no use flogging a dead horse. So, that does counteract it. But you may have to change the way you sell your products and services. Supermarkets are putting up shields. You have waiting lines outside and so on, or the way you deliver them. Restaurants now only do takeaway instead of eat in. So your channels to market will have to be changed accordingly. You may need to move your business to an online presence only for the time being. Depends what you're in, as will your communications. So I guess what communication skills should you focus on comes next, and that's there's a lot of talk about social media and how that's the new thing, and for many the only thing. And I'd say no, it isn't. It's just another channel of communication. It has some great positives about it, but it's only one of many tools of your trade. I think the most important thing to focus on is the so-called soft skills, empathy. You need to put yourself in the shoes of your audience. How do they feel? What reassurances do they need? When we're born, and any of you who've studied developmental psychology, okay, how people learn to think. When we're born, we are literally the center of our own universe. And we're the only thing that exists. We then learn that there is an outside world, and we learn how to manipulate it to suit our needs. We become the emperor. And so we can cry and make an unpleasant noise, and we get fed. And so it's all about satisfaction without gratitude. And it's only later when we really grow up that we understand we're just one of billions of people, and the world doesn't revolve around us. We're just another person, you know. And the point of this is everybody only cares about themselves. They don't care about you. They don't care about your business. They don't care about your products, and they don't care about your services. It's all about me, 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 me. So what you need to do is formulate everything you say and everything you do, not to say how great you are or how whatever you're going to do for people. They don't care. It's, you know, what's in it for me? And in a crisis, it's very easy to become overexcited, to become stressed. We have a fight or flight instinct when bad things happen, and you must fight that. Fight the fight instinct. You know, stay calm, be direct, and be honest. These are qualities that people both need and appreciate. And this is a time where you need to demonstrate both judgment and true leadership. And leadership in this case, it's not about telling people what to do. It's about explaining what needs to change and why, and to inspire them with the confidence that you will all pull through this, and you can, each of them can make a real difference in the meanwhile. Now, that may or may not include operating your business. Many have diverted to serving charitable aims while they can't do their normal work, sewing masks for the hospital and so on. But whatever it is, by demonstrating leadership, you help people have a real sense of purpose in life, and that's incredibly important in stressful times like these.
Henry, I've just heard, and from my side, the trust that the employees and the team must have in their leaders today is probably even greater. And yet the challenge is, how can you build that environment of trust when you actually are working remotely? So there's some quite interesting things. And I think the point that you made earlier about apologizing for the crisis, well, actually, funnily enough, we're almost in a perfect crisis because it's not the company's fault. Okay, and I think what you're referring to is actually apologize for the repercussions of the crisis on your business, how you're performing your services and delivering your goods. And I think that's actually another really good way of actually keeping in touch with your customers, isn't it? So
indeed it is. Thank you, Dermot. That's exactly what I meant. It's not your fault that we've got a virus, but, but apologizing for the effect. You know, if somebody is upset, you can say, I'm really sorry you're upset, without it necessarily meaning, I'm sorry I upset you.
Yeah.
It's showing empathy rather than making an excuse. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just before we go on, I just want to bring to the audience the questions panel on your screens. Any one of you can submit a question at any moment in time. And it would be really good if we had some questions in from the audience as Henry goes through what is developing into a fascinating webinar. Thank you, Henry. Back to you.
Thank you, Dermot. Okay. Well, our next point is how often should we communicate and what channels should we use? And again, that depends on your type of business, your type of the relationships you have with your key target audiences. For key suppliers, for example, I believe you should telephone them in person right away and agree a way forward, whatever that is. It may be, I'm terribly sorry, I can't pay you this month, but you know, but I will as soon as I can, or it might, whatever it is, deal with your supplier straight away and do it personally and agree something between the two of you that's good for both of you. Okay, everybody wants to be paid right away, but it's better to keep a customer happy and get paid eventually than for everything to fall apart. So what many people in debt do is they just try and ignore all those horrible chasing letters that come through the letterbox. Just take a deep breath, give them a call, and just say, this is the situation. I'm sorry this is the situation, but here it is. And this is what and how do we go forward? Here's what I propose. What do you think about that? And then come to a happy agreement. And it's almost always possible to do that. Now, when it comes to your clients, it should be frequently enough to keep you what's known as top of mind, okay? You don't want them to forget about you if you're not doing business with. I mean, you may, depending on how you've re-engineered or what you're doing, you may be able to have lots of things to tell them going forward. That's great. Keep doing that. For those that are on ice, you want to stay top of mind. You want to keep in regular contact, but not so often that you become a nuisance. Okay, we're all being bombarded by hundreds of emails every day, so keep them short, keep them useful. And there may be things you can say, not about you, not about your business, not me, but helpful tips for them in dealing with their situation, which has nothing to do with selling them stuff. I think the key to success is just it should be regular, and the timing of how regular, how often is regular, will depend on your circumstances and your target audience. So do's and don'ts of internal communications. Now that lots of people are furloughed or working from home, I mean, almost everybody's working from home now, except for key workers and some takeout restaurants and so on. And as I said, resist the fight or flight. Stay calm, be honest, be direct and forthright, but give staff clear instructions and guidance on what to do next. I know someone who's an ex-vice admiral of the British Navy, and he used to tell a story about early on in his career where he was on a gigantic battleship and in incredibly heavy seas out in the middle of the ocean. And the boat was rocking back and forth, and things were flying all over the place. And his staff were quite clearly incredibly afraid because they thought the ship was going to sink. And they turned to him and they said, what do we do next? And he was thinking, oh my God, we're going to sink, we're all going to drown and die. But he stayed calm. Outwardly, he was calm. And he just said, we'll do this, we'll head in this direction, we'll ride it out, everything will be fine. And sure enough, they survived, and he got promoted to vice admiral in the end. So even if you think it's all over, you're all going to die, it's all going to be horrible, you are the leader. You're the one that needs to at least appear to be calm on the outside. Okay, we all have our fears and panics, but you need to hold that down and be the real leader. And if you're the calm one who just helps direct them, they'll be incredibly grateful, and they'll do whatever you say, and they'll be glad of the opportunity to do that, because it takes their mind off it takes the edge off some of that fear. So the important thing to remember is your staff are isolated and alone. They're probably lonely, so regular phone calls, if you've got a small enough staff to actually speak to them in person, and it doesn't have to be a telephone. It can be one of these video chats on any of a number of apps. But a personal chat. How are you? How's it going? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? That goes a long, long way, and it helps them feel connected. Now, if you have lots of staff and can't do that, send them regular emails. That'll help them feel connected. It'll pay off in loyalty down the road. What proactive steps can you take to minimize the impact of the virus? Well, as I said.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. On a slide change there, so we've done it. Well done.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I'm looking at my own slides, so I don't. In case we're right. So what actions can we take to minimize? Well, as I mentioned, you may need to re-engineer either the way you sell or the way you deliver what you do. You may even need to refocus on a different customer base. Many caterers now deliver to homes instead of restaurants. Whatever it is you do, you may or may not be able to continue doing it in a different form. If you can't, think about what capabilities you've got and how you can do something else. And there have been many wonderful examples of that you can read in the daily press every day about that. So think about what you've got, your resources, the people, the machines, the whatever it is, the intellectual capital, and try and think of a new way of using all of that, putting that all together to fill the needs of some new segment of the market. So you need to think about what you can provide, how you'll deliver it, and finally, who you'll get that message across to. And then, of course, you know, in any communications program, you need to work out what are the key corporate messages I want to communicate, what is the tone of voice I want to use in those marketing messages, who is the audience, what are the channels that reach them, and so on. But it's not necessarily, those things aren't necessarily just about communication, but it's, I mean, I don't know if it's useful to just mention briefly, there's a whole range of support the government is now providing for individuals, for businesses. There's the furlough scheme, there's holiday rent, 3-month holiday rent, sorry, a 3-month mortgage holiday where you don't have to pay your mortgage for 3 months. You don't have to pay rent on your commercial property for three months. You can delay your VAT. There's now new programs helping for small businesses or people who run a company and paid themselves by dividends instead of salary, and reclaiming sick pay. And there's a whole range of things. So I would say either go on the government website, which lays it out for you, or speak to your accountants. And if you don't have a good accountant, come back to me later. Dermot can put you in touch with me, and I'd be very happy to introduce you to one. So there are all those supports, and I would say you should take full advantage of every single one of them that you can. There's no harm in doing so. VAT, for example, you can put it off till next year, and it's like an interest-free loan. I've got a VAT bill to pay myself, quite a substantial one, and I've got plenty of cash in the bank. But I just thought, well, why don't I just keep the cash for now and pay them next year? So that's what I'm doing, and I think you should too. How can okay, if your business is actually suffering negative publicity at the moment, and that can be from the virus or it could be from anything else. It could be because your client services staff can't cope with the volume of traffic. It could be you've let people down badly and they're crying like babies to the national press or whatever it is. So what steps can you take to minimize the impact of that negative publicity? Now here I'm afraid I have to differ. My views differ from those of some of my clients and the PR industry as a whole. I remember a client having a crisis, a media crisis, and I'd say, well, okay, let's fight back. We don't have to take this. And they said, no, Henry, there's no point fighting the media. They have the bigger megaphone. And I've had PR firms, PR and my industry colleagues say, no, let's not do anything. Just keep your head down. It'll all blow over eventually. Well, maybe it will. But by that time, perhaps your business could be destroyed. Your reputation could be ruined. I'm a bit more of I'm a scrappy, pugnacious sort of guy when it comes to clients in trouble. I think the clients, I remember working for a PR firm in my early career, and they said, well, forget your clients, Henry. Clients come and go. It's the press that's here forever, and that's the ass you have to kiss. And I said, no, the clients feed my family. And if they need me to go down with fighting with the ship, I'm going down with the ship. So actually, I got fired from that firm and had to start again elsewhere. But I think you should tackle whatever the problem is, whatever the crisis, the issues. I suggest you tackle it head on. Issue an instant rebuttal to get your point of view across in a timely, forceful, and persuasive way. That is my advice. And I've seen far too many companies and individuals suffer horribly from abusive press coverage because they didn't take that simple, direct, but quite courageous step. And that's what you need to do. Okay, what's next? How can technology help in these times of, well, when Dermot showed me that question, I had to laugh. Don't let my boyish good looks fool you, folks. I'm a little older than I look. I remember when the fax machine was a brand new invention, and God, was it fantastic. It was like a miracle. You know, suddenly instead of having to hire a bike messenger to run a drawing across town or a press release to the newspapers, you could just put it in this machine, and the picture miraculously popped out the other end, and suddenly everything started to speed up. Instead of it taking a week, it took a couple of minutes. And the internet is just another step forward it's just speeding things up another order of magnitude. Instead of it taking minutes, now can take seconds. Now that can be good. If you want to get something across quickly, it's fantastic. It can be horrible if fake news suddenly goes viral. It's very, very difficult to fight back against that. So because it's instantaneous, widespread, and gloriously free of charge, it's a wonderful tool, but it is, as I say, a double-edged sword and can become your worst nightmare. One other thing I'd say about the internet, because again, like social media, many people say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. The internet has well over 1 trillion pages on it now. And the amount of data that it doubles ever so quickly now. So, pardon me. Whatever you think about the wonders of the internet, remember that whatever you put up there is just one page out of many trillions. So you need to, I would say, what I call the real media, or now known as offline media, newspapers, magazines, radio, television, they are far more powerful and persuasive. And particularly in fighting viral fake news, real media can play a fantastic part in putting a stop to further spread. Sorry, now we come on to collaboration with tools and groups available to help businesses. Pardon me. I don't think I need to elaborate about the wide range and ever increasing range of websites like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or communication apps like WhatsApp, Zoom, Microsoft's Team, or House Party. That's a fun one. They can all be useful and effective channels of communication, and they all have their pros and cons. Check them all out, see which suit you best, and use whichever you prefer, or use multiple channels, because that often helps you reach a wider and more diverse audience. I'm quite fond of professional bodies like the chartered institutes. Others I know favor things like the CBI or the city livery guilds. Of course, everyone here should have a profile page on LinkedIn, and you should join as many of the special interest groups that they have on LinkedIn as you want. Well, as they'll let you if you're not a premium paying customer. There are loads of other online forums too, for like-minded entrepreneurs and business people like you. So find those that suit you, and don't just join, but participate. Raise issues, respond to questions raised by others, and make and build a network of people that you can ask for help or advice going forward. I think for most people, though, the most accessible and practical for personal hands-on help are the smaller business networking groups like BNI, International Leaders UK, or indeed dear old Stakeholderz here today, who go out of their way to help you. They introduce you to useful people, They help you build a network of connections, organizations. There are organizations where you can meet people and make friends who are far more likely to go out of their way to help you with either advice or other types of help, rather than merely typing advice on the internet. So I'd say thank you, Dermot, for having me here and for helping all our other stakeholder members by organizing these webinars on a wide range of topics. You're doing a great thing for all of us, and I thank you for it.
Yeah, Henry, that's right. Thank you. So,
any questions from the audience, I guess, is all I can say now. And I don't mind how challenging they are. Go on, kill me.
So, I'm not yet picking up questions from the audience, which suggests that maybe we don't have quite the connection we expected.
I've had, just to jump in there, so this is Helen from Stakeholderz. We've had one question from Paula. What if our customers complain with us because of problems that don't depend on us, that depend from us? So what if our customers complain with us because of problems that don't depend from us?
That's a great question, Paula, and you're one of the corporate communications experts in the audience. I felt sure that a tricky one would come from you. Again, I would say it's the same thing. First, you apologize. I'm really sorry you're having this difficulty. I'm really sorry that you've been let down. But it isn't us that did it. It's whatever. It's X has happened because of Y, and you run them through what the problem is and who the problem really is with, if you can figure it out, and better still, if it's at all possible, try to come up with one or more suggestions for how they might solve the problem themselves, or how they might get the real culprits to help fix the problem for them, how they might light a bonfire underneath that problem causer to encourage them. So I don't know what the problem is, Paula, but if it's a British Telecom and the internet has collapsed and they're blaming you that you didn't deliver through the internet, explain that if they actually they could spend an hour trying to get through to BT BT it's a telephone company that can't answer their own phone. So what else can you do? Well, you could try sending them a message on Twitter. That generally works much quicker with all big companies because it's a public forum and they don't like to be seen to be knuckleheads who are ignoring, the bad things that they're doing to the public. So that's a good way. If it's a very big problem and a persistent, long-running one, I think the national press are fantastic. When I'm trying to get companies or governments to do things that I want or that my clients want, I find a nice, big, prominent article in a national daily or Sunday paper works a charm at waking them up to the issue and to incentivizing them to deal with it carefully and quickly. Does that help, Paula?
Thank you very much there, Henry. We've got two more quick questions, please, if you've got time. The first is from Tony Barry. Business continuity plan. You mentioned staff arrangements, productivity planning, cross-skilling. What else, please?
Okay. I'm not terribly sorry. I'm not sure what business he's in, but I think what you've got people who are working from home. Say they're lonely, they're cut off from their team. They've got no one to chat to at the desk next to them to talk about what they're dealing with and how best to take things forward. So I'd say you might want to set up a WhatsApp group for you and your team, and be able to have a way that they can instantly communicate with one or more of you to just deal with issues that are coming up, right throughout the day. I think giving them things to do, just to keep them busy, to giving them guidance. Many people are not used to working from home, and with all its distractions of the dog, the children, the whatevers. Simple guidelines about setting fixed hours. Change out of your pajamas in the morning, get dressed for real. I'm wearing a suit and tie, but I'm at home. Why? Well, because it's part of the discipline. It's like what prisoners of war, British prisoners of war in Japanese concentration camps. They always shaved every morning. Their girlfriends weren't going to see them, so why'd they bother? It's a discipline. It keeps you focused and organized, and it helps you retain a sense of purpose and a meaning to life. I mean, it's ridiculous that wearing a tie doesn't give me a meaning in life, but when I do dress for work, I'm ready for work, and I mean business. I'm serious, and I joke too. That's my nature, but it does help provide a regularity of process that many people now lack and desperately need. Does that help answer that question, Barry?
Thank you very much, Henry. And one last final question, if you don't mind, from Anthony Downs, and he's asked, how do we manage the situation when our communication management is, for example, better than our customers? So our customers are not portraying the best image, and that therefore may have an associated impact on others.
Yes. The old dialogue in the PR industry about image versus reality. Your communications people are almost always better than customers. There's one thing I can almost guarantee about customers is they're a pain in the neck. They're a real nuisance. Why do we need customers when there's so much trouble to deal with? Well, because that's the business. Okay, now if your customers are complaining because the service you provide isn't as good as the communications promises you have made, there are two ways around that. Of course, one is to stop saying you're so damn good. If you're not, just be more honest and direct, and don't overpromise anymore. Just say, this is what we can do, and we'll do that instead. And maybe you may need to cut your price, or I don't know what. But or the best solution, of course, is if you're failing to deliver the service or products in the way that your customers want and expect, then try to improve the products and services that you're delivering. That's the best thing. And if you can't do that, then try to refocus your corporate communications team to, instead of devoting their attentions and energies and time to saying how wonderful you are, let them focus instead on good old customer service. I'm terribly sorry. What's the problem? Have them be sympathetic, empathetic, and deal with the complaints of the customers in a way which will hopefully explain why they are disappointed. What's gone wrong? The standard stuff. What's gone wrong? Why it went wrong? You're terribly sorry, and this is what you can do to try and fix it. And it's every customer complaint is really crisis management in miniature. Okay, and so treat every single customer as if they're the Sunday Times doing an investigative hack job on you. They're important because it takes a long time to get a customer, and it's so easy to lose them. But there's a proven fact of marketing that if you have a customer, everybody makes mistakes. There's always some problem. Even I've screwed up. But if you go back to the customer and you make it good, they become incredibly loyal to you, far more loyal than if you'd always just delivered a 100% perfect, top-notch job. So if you made a mistake, that's okay. That's what happens in life. You just say, I'm really sorry. We screwed up. We didn't deliver. We're not as good. We didn't, whatever it is. But this is what we're going to do to make it up to you. And they'll love you forever for it. and then try not to make the same mistake twice. I have a rule in my company. Everybody who works for me is entitled to make an infinite number of mistakes. They're just not allowed to make the same one twice. Now, I did once have a member of staff who made the same mistake twice, and I didn't fire them. But I did tell them that was twice, and that's not allowed. And when they made it a third time, I did fire them. So don't make the same mistake twice. You're allowed to make as many mistakes as you want, or have to, or end up being, but make them new and refreshingly different each time. But that's what I would suggest. You get your comms team to refocus and get your back office, whatever it is, the production line, the service providers, whatever, tell them we've had these complaints and this is what we need to stop them happening in future. Dermot.
Henry, I'm just conscious of time. You've given us all a fascinating 45 minutes and a little bit more. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
I marked you down as a bonfire lighter and a knucklehead exposer. So, bonfire lighter extraordinaire. So it's been truly amazing. Thank you so much. So thank you for being part of this morning's great piece of information and entertainment for our attendees. It just leaves me to round up and finish off the webinar. So I'd like to let you know that you'll all receive a follow-up email in the next hour so that you can actually view this webinar as a recording. And if you'd like to share it on your connections, please do so. We'd welcome that. And there will be a survey once this webinar has ended for you to tell us a little bit more about what else you'd like to hear about from stakeholders, and therefore we can tailor our program to you accordingly. Looking ahead, next week will be a busy week. We've got 2 webinars lined up. On Wednesday, we've got Stephen Kelly, who's the ex-CEO of Sage and who's worked at Cordiant and is very, very high profile in terms of his change, transformation and growth profile in the technology sector. And then on Friday, we're coming back to look at a subject not too far away from the one we've talked about today, which is the future of the working world. And this is based on a recent survey we've done through our sister company, Intramezzo, and we'll have an occupational psychologist on the line who is in fact leading our change and transformation program within Intramezzo. So do follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And therefore, finally, it remains for me to say, thank you, Henry. You'd like to make one last point?
Terribly sorry. Just one more thing. I just want to tell everyone in the audience, I'm doing this because I genuinely am very keen to help all my fellow members of the stakeholders community. And for those who've asked questions or for those who haven't yet but would like to, I am very happy to talk to you afterwards. If you have any issues, questions, problems, please get my contact details from Dermot and I'd be very happy to help you.
Very good, Henry, thank you. So on that note, a great note to finish. Thank you once again, Henry. Thank you all for attending, and bye and see you on the next webinar.
Thanks, bye.